follow all the leaders around the whole time and interview them about every 30 seconds. In effect, the three-party leaders are just on a permanent Twitter feed, a verbal Twitter feed. And I think there is a large chance that most of Britain will emigrate on May the 5th just to avoid the end of it. Alistair Darling, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he was yesterday rebutting Conservative financial figures and said these very clever words: "What you can't do is spend money you don't know you've got." Which, from a man basically holding the purse strings of a government who spent a lot of money that it did know it didn't have, that's an interesting sideways step. If you don't know you've got it, you shouldn't spend it. But if you know you don't have it, spend away. That's economics, John. That's why you and me can't do it. We don't have that level of sideways thought.
David Cameron, the Conservative candidate, is, as part of their manifesto, proposing voluntary national citizen service for all 16-year-olds, where they join a 2-month residential scheme featuring outdoor activities and community work. He said, "Show me a gang taking drugs, and I'll show you a group of people who have nothing to look forward to." Now, hold on. I mean, that's not strictly true, Andy. I believe they're very much looking forward, for instance, to the next time they take drugs. That's the ideal thing on their horizon. And also, not that this scheme doesn't have its merit in principle, but I would question the viability of appealing to a gang taking drugs with a 2-month scheme of outdoor activities and community work.
Probably just doesn't have it's not the same instant adrenaline rush, is it?
No, it's a longer high. A more sustained high.
Just that more ultimately satisfying.
An interesting fact regarding the UK elections, and one that probably provides a great insight into the British electorate's psyche, is that our elections are always held on a Thursday. Now, this is just a convention rather than a full legal stipulation. The original reason for it being that people were not paid until Fridays, so holding polls on Thursdays ensured that they were not too drunk to vote. We might want to vote, Andy, but such is our predilection for self-annihilation that we need to be protected from our own bad decisions by scheduling the election on the one day a week we are least likely to be unconscious. Such is our drinking problem. We need that decision taking out of our hands. And apparently the Electoral Commission has recommended trials of weekend voting as a way of improving turnout. But again, they will just have to be trials, Andy, and I fear that those trials may reveal results of a lot of people vomiting, urinating and falling asleep in voting booths.
Does that count as a spoiled ballot paper?
Oh, you know it does.
If you've chundered on it. So that's the ultimate protest vote. Just a ballot paper wrapped up containing a small morsel of sick. So for our non-British-based Bugle listeners who might not know too much about them, we are going to be doing a week-by-week series of profiles on the leaders in this election campaign, starting this week with the front-runner, David Cameron of the Conservatives, or Dave Cameron, as he insists on being called, a 43-year-old career politician with a wealth of experience in, for example, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. His big idea that he thought of recently is this: the big society. They've been talking about the big society, John. This is the
what does that mean, Andy?
Well,
because that's a slightly catchy phrase. What does that actually mean? Those two words together.
Well, I mean, I guess it means that there's a society, and they want to make it big.
Okay, that's what I thought it meant. Yeah. Okay, carry on.
Okay, but it's basically an emphasis on community schemes and volunteer work. To basically pick up the slack when the state just can't be asked to do something.
Yeah.
And it's something of a turnaround for the Tories, of course, whose prominent 1980s nation-splitting leader, Margaret Thatcher, as the French called her, famously said there was no such thing as society. And now Cameron is talking about big society. So it's quite a turnaround, although to be fair to Thatcher, she'd got her words mixed up and meant to say there's no such thing as a unicorn. And I would advise all buglers to steer well clear of Thatcher's children's literature. It is, at best, dry. So, Cameron's other main policy is having a nice wife. But yet again, this just shows the lack of choice in this election campaign, John, because Gordon Brown's wife, she also seems nice. And the Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg, his wife, she seems nice too. So, Where's the choice? You know?
They're all fighting over the middle ground there.
That's right. What about the disenfranchised silent majority who like their politicians to marry total bitches? Who's catering for them, John? I think this might be another reason why people are drifting towards the BNP. No, I don't know what Nick Griffin's wife is like, but I do know what Nick Griffin is like, and I'm prepared to go with my hunch that Mrs. Griffin isn't with him for his looks. So, as in America now, celebrity endorsements are becoming more and more important in British politics, and the Conservatives yesterday unveiled actor Michael Caine as their support.
What?
Yep, Michael Caine is a Tory, John.
No.
Yep.
Michael Caine is voting Conservative.
Yep. How are the mighty swung slightly to the right?
Ugh.
Will that swing it, though, John? Will Michael Caine decide this election? Will anyone be sitting at home on May the 6th thinking, I can't decide how to vote, the entire future of my country is at stake? Well, it's obviously not. It's really just a minor difference in how the accounts are done. But let's spice things up a bit. The survival of Britain is on the line. I can't bring myself to vote for a government that has largely wasted a vast democratic mandate over 13 increasingly irritating years, nor for an opposition that seems to fly with the wind and hasn't entirely left behind its legacy of division, nor for the third party whose name I can't even remember and who believe in bits and bobs of stuff. How to choose, guide me, O Lord. Hang on, is that Michael Caine? I'm voting for them.
Yeah,
is that how democracy works?
It kind of is. You know, he means a lot to people. Personally, I've, for the last 20 years of my life, worn an ankle bracelet that has a WWMCD on it. You know, he's a guiding light. This gives me pause for thought.
Would you now vote, you know?
Well, I mean, now I'll swim over Andy to get there in time.
You know, because he, fellow film star, of course. You know, maybe he's the role model that your lagging democracy is crying out for. So for the next few weeks, Buglers, until the election is finally done and mercifully dusted, we will have an election feature section every week with all the latest must-have news and gossip from the election campaign, by which I mean really reporting on whether Britain can summon itself enough enthusiasm to give a quarter of a shit.
It won't be so much must-have news as can have and will have news, Andy. Yep. But still.
We'll have and then we'll probably try to forget.
Yeah. Nuke news now! And President Obama made promises last year, Andy, to try and help wean America and the world off nuclear weapons. And now that's obviously not going to be easy. The truth is that nuclear weapons are far too addictive ever to be completely free of. They're like heroin. You know, a heroin addict is never not a heroin addict. The best case scenario is that they become a heroin addict who doesn't take heroin anymore, or that they find fame with a band called the Stooges. But this last week, Obama made a small step forward and signed a new nuclear pact with Russia. The pact commits both nations to slash the number of strategic nuclear warheads by 1/3 and more than halve the number of missiles, submarines and bombers that carry them. Now, this might seem to be suddenly happening all too quickly, but don't worry, Andy. This reduction still leaves both countries with enough firepower to ensure mutual destruction several times over. So that's a huge relief. I personally wouldn't be able to sleep at night if we were going to go down to just mutual destruction. I think it really has to be multiple mutual destruction to have any hope of working as a deterrent. But it's true that the main impact of this treaty is not so much what it does as what it symbolises. It's a big step for the US and Russia to decide to work together rather than both continue to act like dicks. And that essentially was the choice available to them. It's not really much more complicated than that. In fact, I believe that was on the second page of the treaty. We'll both try not to act like dicks. Also, on this Tuesday, Obama unveiled his new nuclear posture review, which openly reduces the circumstances under which the US would consider using nuclear weapons. It states that the United States will not use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states that are party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and in compliance with their nuclear non-proliferation obligations. Now, that doesn't seem particularly dramatic, especially when you consider that the review also reserves the right for the US to use nuclear weapons if one of the member states uses a chemical attack against them. So again, a development which is more meaningful symbolically than practically,